So we're going to be talking about ACFT training plans. And whenever we talk about that, what we're really trying to get into is it is an assessment of what your current state of physical health is, what that really looks like at this time. And once we have that information about what your current health is, then we can start to put together a plan in order to get you to where you want to be. Now, we're going to be talking about numerous different parts of this. We're going to be bringing in our little chart up here that outlines what a training plan looks like. Yeah, what a training plan looks like. This is one we used from the class yesterday for a group. We're going to be going over that, but there is one big piece that we need to cover first of this. And before we get into that, my name is Benjamin Morris. I'm a tactical strength conditioning facilitator, military master fitness trainer. I'm also a former Army drill sergeant, and I was a Pacific Best Warrior winner. So I have one, been taught specifically on how to do this, and two, I've actually put this into use, not only for many personnel ranging in a large number of fields, but also for myself. So I know everybody likes to actually hear those weight loss stories about the individuals who did that. The first thing I want to make sure that everybody gets across, that whether you are a leader setting and talking to somebody or that you need to do for yourself, is what we refer to as needs analysis. Now, this shows up both in a lot of civilian programming and also in the military master fitness thing. And it is something that if you were to take one word away from this, that you're going to go back and Google and see how to correctly use and what this actually means, it's this phrase, needs analysis. What needs analysis is, I'm going to teach you the MFT version of it. It is the process of us figuring out what exactly we need to put inside that training program for that individual. They like to break it down in 3 parts. I'm going to add a 4th to it at the end. The first is going to be, what is their injury history? So if I have somebody who comes up here and they sit down, we start to work together a training plan, their injury history plays a big deal into what the plan is going to look like at the start and for the path to be us going through. If they're telling us that they have weak ankles, or they've consistently had back problems, or they have a shoulder that always provides them issues, then we need to make sure that we're aware of that, and that is factored into the training plan at the start as we're building on through. The next thing that we need to identify and that we need to talk in is what their current state of health is. And this is going to be a little bit bigger, so we're going to be on this one for a while. So give me time to fully go through this on top of the soapbox here as we do it. Whenever we talk about their current state of health, this is where their current PT test scores comes in. There needs to be some type of assessment done on what their current state of health is. The United States Army uses the Army Combat Fitness Test, or they're about to. There is the PST. There is the Marine Corps has theirs. I work with the Honolulu Fire Department. They have their own assessment of what they can utilize to determine what somebody's overall physical current state health is, right? We need to know that information. And that's important because it's going to be very vital in us directing the path of where we're going, of what exercises and movements we're going to be prescribing inside of that training program. So we need to make sure that that is accounted for and that we have access to it. The other thing that really matters into this is what is your BMI. This is why there is a body fat check as individuals inside the military go through their PT test program. It's not only to make sure that they maintain these healthy standards, but if you're to sit down and build a training plan, it is a vital piece of information because it is a snapshot of what their current body composition is. Now, is the current way that the military does it right or wrong? This is not the discussion forum, is that? But understand that one of the most vital, important things of the BMI check is to provide important information for how change needs to be going moving forward for that individual as we're putting together a training plan for it. And this is not only for the leader, but for the individual itself. Have that information because it is vitally important as we keep on going through this process. The last part, the third leg of the needs analysis program that you need to understand is what the future goals are. If you have somebody that's sitting down in front of you that you're trying to help and their goal is to be under a certain BMI or body fat, then that needs to be identified at the start. If their goal is to pass the deadlift, if their goal is that they have a run time that they need to beat, or they can't perform a leg tuck. Always imagine that you have you don't have an infinite amount of time to be able to train with these people. You have 1 hour a day and you have to be able to structure, make good utilization of that time. And you need to tilt that time towards either the improvement in helping them get better at the leg tuck, or you need to tilt it towards helping them be able to lose body weight. But we need to understand the goal that this individual has. We need to make sure that we are pointing their training plan at them accomplishing that goal, because that is going to make the overall effect of what what is sitting down and done as we put together this training plan, that's going to make it 10 times more powerful as we go the rest of the way through this. The third part of it, or I'm sorry, the fourth part of it, the part that I like to add into this myself, and I notice this amongst a lot of people who feel as if they're in desperation whenever it comes down to their training plan. This is popping up a lot with people who are afraid of the ACFT, or people who are afraid of losing their job because of their current body composition. Whenever they have this sense of desperation inside of their training plan, one of the things that really starts to occur is they way overdo the intensity of the training plan. We know from a lot of research and study now that if you consistently train to where you have 0 reps in a tank, where if you consistently train to complete muscle failure, what that ultimately leads to is an inability for you to fully recover from that. Especially if you have somebody who is training for desperation, who's training because there is a fear placed upon them of being able to reach this future goal, or being able to keep their profession. It's important that you outline to them that while, yes, there is a possibility that you could absolutely lose your goal, we don't need you to empty the tank out on every training event that you go to. And the reason that this really matters is if you empty your tank out every day as you're going through your training process, then you can't fully recover for the next day's training. And over the course of time, this starts to really degrade at the possible gains that you could make of you being able to reach that goal that you have set out. That's why it's important that you understand what the intensity level is, or the value of recovery, or there's clearly communicated to them at what point we are going to start going full bore on these, because we're not going to be starting out with that, especially if somebody is in a current position or current state of health to where this thing that they do, this thing that threatens their lifestyle, is possibly out there at it. All right, so we got a question here. To keep on moving through it, let's go into the actual training program itself, what it actually needs to look like. Training programs always start at the most recent assessment. So whether it is at a PT test, or it's an individual assessment that you're doing for somebody, or if it's we had one individual that the assessment literally started after they had been put out of a course, right after they had been kicked out of class. Now them needing to lose weight has become pretty paramount. Okay, so that's where these always start at, is at some type of assessment. Now, if you're an individual who is, we have the ability to actually give you a very valid assessment to see what your overall state of health is. I greatly prefer to people go through a taper process before they go through some type of test. And whenever we talk about a taper process, what we're referring to is we want you to fully exercise your recovery plan leading into it. So, depending on the age, individual and their experience level, we'll try to have 1 to 4 days of downtime. We'll try to concentrate on the foods that they're eating leading into it. This is what they're going to, set themselves up for peak performance inside of a PT test, right? This is the exact thing that we do. What's your rest time? What's your sleep time? When are we, purging all the alcohol out of our system? What are the foods that we're going to eat before it? We're going to go through that process that we set them up to be able to get the best score possible whenever we go through that assessment. After we've gone through that, I also like to recommend that especially for tactical populations that don't have an off season, they have to consistently train, but they don't have an off season to allow their body to fully re-heal. Especially after the assessment part, we also like to, I strongly encourage to put at the minimum 3 days on the backside of that to allow for a lot of the injuries that have popped up on people's body, allow them time to fully recover, because we do want you to go max effort on the assessment, on the ACFT or the JST, whatever you're going out there to do. We want you to go max effort at that, because we want to see what your current, a really good snapshot of what your current state of health is. After we went through that taper process and kind of a makeshift off season for tactical populations, right? That's what you see up here at the top of this part. The other thing that we need to walk out there, and we talked about this earlier, I'm not going to harp on it, is that we do need some type of body composition measurement, right? Whether this is just electrodes that you're holding to be able to gauge it, or if this is an actual circumference measurement, or if you want to go to bipod and be able to get those type of measurements at that time. Any of those is fine, but we want to have that current assessment, and we want to have some type of BMI. What is the BMI for this individual at our starting point? Then we're going to sit down and figure out how we're going to be able to look this through. Now, the word that you need to remember, the first part of this, we really talked about needs analysis. You need to have an understanding of the needs analysis process for yourself, or if you're working with somebody sitting across from you as you're going through everything. That's vital. As we move into the second part, we actually start to put pen to paper and work out a training plan for 10, 12, 15 weeks, however long we're going to do it. The next phase that you need to next word that you really need to understand, especially for tactical populations, is undulation. Now, what undulation is that means that we're going to be weaving in and out of certain areas of fitness modalities. So that way we create a very wide base of physical resilience for us to be able to work and to grow from. That was a lot of words to say this very simple thing of we're going to structure it to where we have some power training time, some strength training time, and some cardiovascular training time. Power training be picking up heavy weights for minimum amount of rep. Strength training being that we're going to move, we're going to try to get lots of reps with the weight that we're moving. And cardiovascular training time meaning that we're going to provide some type of steady state training, right? So we're going to have these three modes inside of it. For the vast majority of people, I have had a few that are outside this. We like to have it to where it is every day. So as you can see here, we're going to start off with strength training, then we're going to go into power training. This is for the lead week. I always encourage people, especially if injuries are something that are really fearful to you, and we'll come back and talk about this, to have a mobility day once a week. Then we'll go, we have our cardio training, and for this week, we're going to get a second strength training week inside of that week, right? We're going to weave in and out of those modalities. Whenever we talk about power training, what we're going to break that down into. Yes, I did. Did you say that? This is a really good question. Did you say that the size, height, and weight will play a factor in a big role in training? Not necessarily height and weight, but it plays a big factor in determining a BMI, right? Plays a big factor in determining somebody's training plan. Height and weight can be utilized to figure out what to create a range. But what we're really looking for is if weight matters, because it can tell us if we're overtraining somebody, it can tell us if we're undertraining somebody. A piece of information that we want to have assess at this point and at this point, right? So we don't want to do it regularly, consistently every week, but that's a good piece of information for us to gather at the far side of each one of these. Do I have a digital copy of this board? Yes, I do. I think we've had website issues yet, but I'm very sure it's actually up there on top of the board, inside of it, and on top of the website. But to break down the three categories, thank you all very much for the questions. To break down the three categories that we just went through, power training is us picking up and providing max stimulus against the muscle, max resistance against the muscle. And we're not necessarily trying to make somebody move the most weight possible. Much prefer to think of it in the mindset of trying to control the most weight possible. So not only does it contain a lot of, during that time, do we want to have a lot of bench presses and deadlifts and squats, but we also want to have a lot of fireman's carries, your body being forced to handle and hold this amount of weight over a very short time, but having a big weight placed against the body that is having to utilize and control. I do not encourage at all, whenever we were talking about not training to failure, especially for somebody who is failing a PT test, who is not near maxing it, we never push to max max effort, not even going up to 85% effort whenever we're doing power training. The reason for that is this is the most injury risk that we face on a training plan, is whenever we're doing these power training sessions, right? So if your body really lacks the adaptations to be able to control that weight, and we're trying to make it control it, especially over a longer course of time, then the injury risk factor for this whole training plan goes up dramatically. And we want to, the number one thing that causes training plans to fail is injuries, right? So we want to keep that risk minimized. So especially during power training cycles, we are in no way trying to train to full hypertrophy, full burnout. We're trying to avoid that. We're just trying to get the body accustomed and realize and feel that stimulus that we want it to train to. As we move into strength training times, this is where we'll go to a lot of unilateral work. There'll be a lot of TRX work. There'll be a lot of bag work. There'll be a lot of ropes. Things that we're doing in under 3-minute time blocks that we are trying to directly target a joint or a muscle system to try to get it to recognize the stimulus that we're trying to provide against it, right? There tends to be a lot of ab work that exists inside this also. it's very easy for people who do this virtually, it's very easy for people to have this tilt to the point where it does become more of a cardiovascular workout. We do want to avoid that whenever we are talking about doing strength training inside of our training cycle, inside of this. We want to avoid that. We want to keep this under those 3-minute times. We want to be targeted at the exact thing that we're trying to enforce. Generally, we will also move out to, whenever we're doing power training, we'll spend a lot of time targeting the big axle points in the army, right? So in the body. So, the chest, the back, the hips, we'll be targeting those muscles. As we move out to strength training, we're also moving farther out the limbs. So we'll spend more time working on the bicep and tricep and forearms and the calves and soleus, tibialis and our feet. We'll spend more time concentrating on those muscles as we move out to our strength training time. The last part of this is our cardiovascular training. Now, this falls into realistically 3 different buckets. The first is exactly what you think it is, steady state cardio, to where you're going to go out and try to keep the body engaged and moving under some type of very light, moderate stress over the course of at least 12 minutes, right? So there's this consistent light jog, walk, run, whatever it is that you've placed against this individual that they're trying to do. The other mode that we really like to talk about is all the alternatives, right? So biking, rowing, swimming, all of these, if you're going to utilize them, they're great. I strongly encourage it, because especially for people who are having issues passing a run, being able to change up their cardiovascular modality of which they're training can reap huge benefits for them. If you're going to change that up and have them doing that, right, keep it focused on the sake of what we talked about earlier, that we're trying to go over that 12-minute mark. So we're not going to try to have them necessarily go out and swim as hard as fast as they can. Rather, we want them to go over a light swim and try to stretch it out over a full 12 minutes. Same thing with rowing. Now, the last part of that is what we refer to as power endurance time, right? Now, this is us doing what we just talked about, to where we are trying to hammer at hill repeats and sprints and swimming as fast as we can on those. That needs to be very limited on the schedule, but it does play a very good and important role at helping the body adjust over time. But whenever you do target those and put them inside the training schedule, keep them inside the training program on one of the cardio days. That's where you tend to get the most benefit from them. If the target is for somebody to truly lose weight, they can be beneficial if you want to tilt it on the strength training days, but that needs to be specific to that individual. The other caveat to that is because we have trained a few swimmers in my time here. If you're working with swimmers, then obviously we need to invert some of that. Swimmers do still need to run, but we do need to spend more time focusing on them, getting them in the pool and helping them swim. We're out in the ocean because that's where we did a lot of swimming, out going over to Nimitz Beach. Yeah. So whenever you look at this, there was a gentleman over here that just asked a question about this board, or an individual just asked a question about this board. You can see that while on Mondays, in week 1, we're going to be starting with strength. On week 2, we're starting with power. And on week 4, we're going to be starting, back over here with cardio. And we're going to be weaving those in and out. So whenever we talk about undulation, the weaving of these training modalities in and out, we don't necessarily have to have it this way that this is set up here currently. You could absolutely have it set up to where you have a power training week, you have a strength training week, you have a cardio training week. This tends to be very beneficial because there's been a few people who enjoy doing CrossFit or enjoy doing the recent one that we had a gentleman here who enjoyed jiu-jitsu, right? And us being able to have 1 week just completed, devoted to him being able to go out and just do his jiu-jitsu that he enjoyed doing inside of this and have that inside of the rotation, that was exactly how he wanted to train in order for him to be able to reach his goals. That's why we need to make sure that we listen to the person, we go through the needs analysis, and don't feel like this is the exact structure that you need to follow, but that undulation of weaving in and out of modalities, that's the point that we want you to take back from and say, okay, so this is going to be the power day, this is going to be strength, this is going to be cardio, and so on and so forth. One other thing I like to put in the list whenever I do them, and we're going to start wrapping this up with this note, is we talked about this earlier, is I like to have one mobility day a week inside of our training programs. And I am very hard and fast on this, whether they be individuals I train here or virtually. We have one mobility day a week inside of our training program. The reason for this, and I want to point out that the more advanced a trainer somebody is, the more that this is needed. Inside of your training program, if you are going to, like we said earlier, the number one thing that causes this to fail is going to be injuries. That's the number one thing that causes training programs to actually fail. So if we have 1 day a week completely devoted to ensuring that the body its joints and muscles have good mobility and flexibility, and we're allowing them to go through their full range of motion with minimal amount of stress placed against them. This is going to greatly reduce the risk of injury that we have of us being able to cover this whole board and be able to reach this endpoint with us being able to, with that individual being able to achieve at their peak performance, with them being able to reach the goals that they need to. So I strongly encourage you, especially if you're working with somebody on the other side, put a mobility day inside of the training program. A day with no other stimulus. There's no power training. There's no strength training. There's no endurance training. Just a day completely focused on addressing their mobility and flexibility and working through that with them, because over the course of time, this is going to increase their overall training output that they're going to be able to get. They're going to get to their goals a lot faster if you have a mobility day inside of the training program to be able, help them be able to get to it. And lastly, we're going to start back. We're going to finish exactly where we ended, right? So we talked about the taper process. Taper is very dependent on age and experience. So if you have an individual that is, they're over 35, they're 38, understand that they will need a longer taper process in order for them to be able to fully re-heal in the body to refuel itself, leading into the PT test, and being able to accept that and adjust and account for it is going to be so much more beneficial to them being able to give you the max effort whenever they go to the test, rather than actually trying to, you're not that old. You only need 2 days of rest, or you only need X amount of rest. No, if you know that you're training with somebody who is either got higher in age, or if they are of low experience level, leave them extra taper time inside of their program. Greatly encourage them to take full advantage of that taper time, so that way they're able to show up at their test day with the body fully healed and the body fully refueled, ready to give max effort at their test day. So this concludes our little ACFT training plan class that we put together here. Once again, this is not meant to be directly, this is how you train for the ACFT, because everybody's going to be different. The ACFT is meant to be an assessment of your current state of health. The United States military has just set out and said this is what the assessment goals need to be. But if you have somebody who's sitting out there that's it's fearful of their job, or if you're trying to help them get to it, if you're a squad leader or yourself that you're trying to work and get better at this, have some type of training plan for you and that individual to be able to work through. If you know that there are events coming up on your unit's training calendar, that there's field training exercises or rotations, it's easy to adjust something that is 12, 16 weeks. It's easy to adjust the calendar to account for those inside of your training program. But have something for them so that way they can follow, so that way they can show up every day. They know exactly what they have to do. Value the 1 hour time that they have. Don't make sure you're tilting it at the goals that they're trying to address. And above all else, if you take nothing else away from this class, so 2 things I would really like for you to make sure that you have is, 1, know and understand the needs analysis process as you sit down to talk with the individual or yourself to put this together. And the second is, especially for tactical populations, as you are going through and trying to put together your training plan, understand how to leverage undulation, so that way you are able to get the most out of the training plan as you're putting together. But with that being said, time to start rounding this off. My name is Benjamin Morris. I'm a former Army drill sergeant, a military master fitness trainer, and master resilience instructor. I'm a tactical strength and conditioning facilitator. I'm also an individual who has won Pacific Best Warrior. So with that being said, we'll give a left and right see if there's any questions. Please, if you have any, after you get this, shoot me an email. Let me know. We will absolutely be glad to. Thank you all very much for all the great comments. I really appreciate it. All right. So with that being said, I thank you very much for your time, and out.